This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
This chapter deals with the purpose and process of management and leadership. First, what's meant by management? And there are out there many definitions of management, but a nice short one is shown here, which is getting things done through people. The idea is you have some sort of organization, there is a boss or bosses, and they have to encourage perhaps each other, but certainly people lower down the chain, to act in ways which are appropriate and ideally act in ways which are keen, enthusiastic, and which show motivation. So through people is very important here. And early thoughts on management science tended to leave out this idea of people being involved, and our aspirations, our hopes, our fears and so on were somewhat disregarded. We were to some extent treated by management more like machines than kind of living, feeling beings. What is an organization? Well, again, we have this idea of a social arrangement for the controlled performance of collective goals. The idea that everyone in the organization is sailing in the same direction, has got their eye on the same ultimate target, which in a profit-seeking organization is likely, of course, to be profits. But for many other types of organization, they could have really very different goals. It could be the number of people who are treated in a hospital. It could be the number of children who pass a particular exam, and so on. So within management and within organization, we have this idea of teams and groups of people that we have to try to motivate and encourage to act in a way that we all aim towards these collective goals. A writer called Bennis made a distinction between managers and leaders. It said managers are they're very necessary but perhaps slightly grey people who have got their eyes firmly set really on administering the status quo or the way things are done at the moment. They focus on controls and systems. They have a fairly short-term view. Typically, their time horizon will be this year's budget, and they're focused on keeping costs within that budget, making sure that there are enough staff employed, that the timetables are right, and so on, to make sure there's enough people coming into work each day to fulfill the obligations. On the other hand, leaders who've got a much more kind of wider horizon, much more far-seeing, their time horizon is likely to be more like 3, 5, 10 years away. Where are we ultimately aiming this organization to be ending up? And they will be developing organization, inspiring trust amongst people. They will not be as interested in the day-to-day minutiae of close management and so on. They'll be more interested in maybe allowing people to experiment and allowing people the freedom to fail. They have more the idea if you don't try anything, you're never going to achieve anything. They're not by any means saying that success is not important, but they're not kind of frightened about maybe missing this time's budget if the longer term prize is still within grasp. And this manager-leader type distinction, seen again in these words here, transformational and a transactional leadership. Very much transactional leadership is the manager doing things right, whatever those things are, whereas transformational leadership is very much more deciding what are the right things to do, doing the right thing, and then the managers can make sure that we look after that, we do those things right. So transformation is saying what should we do, and transactional is saying, well, how can we do that with some form of control. And of course, you need both. Once an organization is mature and fairly stable, it's very important to have good transactional leadership to actually enforce the control. We've recently talked about internal controls. If we didn't have proper internal controls and proper communication of information, the proper authorizations, the whole organization would descend into chaos. But from time to time, you need a leader who will radically change perhaps what the organization is doing, really shake it up if the organization is actually going to survive. Kotter took us up a little bit, this transformational versus transactional leadership here. For example, just look at a couple of these. Creating the agenda. So you have your transformational leader saying, where should we be going? Where is our destination? And you have your transactional leader planning almost the month to month, year to year way of getting to that destination. Developing HR in the transformational leadership, we may be thinking that we need radically different people employed. Maybe we need a very different kind of management structure within the organization. Maybe we need to remove layers of the organization. Whereas the transactional leader is rather more making sure we have enough people coming in on Saturday, to make the shop work, or enough people willing to work overtime towards the end of the month to make sure we get the financial reporting schedules out on time. Execution, the transformational person, is very much about motivating and inspiring, whereas the transactional person, more about controlling, a bit of firefighting, dealing with problems as they come up, and so on. Very much almost eyes on the ground, so to speak, whereas a transformational person has got eyes on the horizon. Outcomes, a transformational person can radically change what the organization is doing, whereas the transactional person is more concerned with its control, this more ordinary, pedestrian sort of predictability and order. A good example maybe of the transformational leadership would be Steve Jobs. When he came back, having been sacked from Apple, came back, I think around the year 2000 and so on, and immediately transformed that company, which had really descended into just a kind of niche company, really for graphics programs, and of course invented things like iTunes, the iPad, the iPhone, and so on, and really inspired people. Difficult person, but by all accounts really inspired people to do well and never to be satisfied with mundane designs. Bennis also talked about the qualities of great leaders. They have to show integrity. There has to be an element of honesty within that. They have to be very dedicated. They have to put the hours in, basically. They have to be almost thinking about the organization most of the time. Magnanimity means, for example, saying that you're wrong when you're wrong, but giving other people praise when they have a good idea, which they follow through and do something well. Humility. A good leader knows that he or she is nothing without people further down the pyramid, the workers and so on. And for a leader to take all the credit for something is unlikely to go down very well. They have to be open. That goes with integrity, really. But if you think the company isn't doing so well, if you think it's going to face some challenges, then maybe we should say that. How will people know that really change is needed if you keep some of these unpalatable truths secret? And finally, creativity. The good leader should be willing to break out of the mold, to be willing to take risks, to try radical new ideas. Really, because if they stick with what they're doing at the minute, there may be progress, but it's likely to be fairly mundane, ordinary, low-level progress and growth. Everyone would like to be a good leader, or every company would like to employ a good leader. The problem is, how do we identify good leaders? How can we perhaps train people to be good leaders? And the three styles of leadership we need to look at: the trait theory, human relations theory, and the style theory. Now we can get rid of trait theory very, very quickly. Trait theory, very old idea, completely discredited really, that you could identify a good leader by certain other traits. For example, maybe they're at least 2 meters tall with blonde hair and blue eyes. And of course there were some countries which at some times in their past thought this was the definition really of a good leader. Or perhaps it's somebody with huge amounts of confidence, or perhaps it's someone who's actually almost slightly bullying or something of that sort. And really this has all been found to be pretty useless, indeed entirely useless, at identifying good leaders. By and large, apart from what we had here, qualities of great leaders come in kind of all shapes and sizes, all races, male, female, etc., etc., and there's no way of kind of administering a kind of a set of tests almost, which is liable to predict good leaders with any sort of decent predictability. Human relations is one we can get on to next, and this was coming in around the 1930s, a person called Elton Mayo. And Elton Mayo, based in America, was brought in by a large American company to do some investigative work about what would motivate employees. And the sort of things that Mayo discovered were, what he tried to do was to change the lighting level. These people were doing very intricate electrical kind of work. And Mayo would put the lights up, put the lights down, change the colours, change whether it was a spotlight or a floodlight and so on. And would go back to these people and interview them and say, was that better or worse? And he discovered that, much to everyone's surprise, that almost no matter what you did with the lighting, even if you made it pretty dim, people seemed to produce more. And this was put down to the idea that people are motivated, they will do better if you take a personal interest in them. So the very fact that he would go along and ask someone for their opinion about the lighting arrangements meant that they felt much more involved with the company and were motivated to do much better. So this is, if you like, a suggestion that if you want to motivate people, that participation of some sort can be a very powerful motivator. Don't just stand there and bark orders at them. They're likely to be full of resentment at that. He also discovered that people like being part of a group. Almost inevitably, you form kind of social alliances with the people you deal with at work, and you quite like to be part of a group. But as well as liking being part of a group will exercise certain control on you, what are called norms, in that you're expected really to behave in a way which falls in line with the group. And even though management might understand that there are certain groups, a department is a group, management also has to understand that there are lots and lots of informal groups and alliances, and if they want to get the organization to change, maybe what they have to do is to address the group and get the group to change. Because it's going to be very difficult to make one person in the group to kind of break ranks, to get one person to work overtime or to work more efficiently, when they're liable then to be maybe ridiculed or punished in some way by their fellow group members. So social relations and the what's called the informal structure, people's ambitions, friendships, enmities, people they don't like, for example, are very, very important in trying to manage individuals. Ashridge Management College, and now we're really getting on to leadership style here. Leadership style is good because it does suggest that you could learn a style. You mightn't be a born leader, but you can at least learn to be a bit of a better leader. And Ashridge Management College identified 4 different really stages or approaches that a leader could take. First of all, the college said that you could tell people what to do. So you're just saying, this is what you have to do, get on with it. I don't want any questions, any discussions, just get on with it. The next stage is you could sell it to people, which is really saying, here's what I'd like you to do because this is why I think it's good. But really you're not inviting discussion with that, you are selling the idea to them. And then we have consulting. And consulting is saying to people, we're not doing so well, we're getting quite a lot of defects in production, what do you think should be done? But consulting, it will be the manager who ultimately takes a decision. And finally we have joins with, which is where everyone gets together and they almost reach a joint decision. It's almost like taking a vote between the manager and the workers as to what should be done. So this is very much a continuum here. The type of management style that can be adopted. And what we'll be saying really through the next slides is that no one is saying that any one of these is always right all of the time. That we're going to be faced with maybe choices as to how we should apply one of these styles. And these choices, for example, might depend on the attitude of the people. It might depend on how long you've got. Because if something is a real emergency, you might just tell them to do it because you don't have the luxury of time to enter into all of this discussion and participation with them. That was simplified rather by McGregor, or a simplified version is that of McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y here. McGregor, and these were kind of extremes of reaction here. McGregor said that really Theory X people, basically they hate work. They go to work only because they need to earn some money, but they're full of resentment. They get no joy from it. They get no social reward from it and so on. And if a manager believes that about the workforce, then the manager is likely to assume that the workforce will be trying to get out of work, really, to shirk, to do less than they really could. And there'll be a really kind of argumentative sort of relationship between the workers and the manager. The manager thinks the workers don't want to work. Maybe the managers are right in some cases, but there's going to be a kind of competitive attitude. Theory Y, the great saying that McGregor had here, was something like, work is as natural as play. So work is as natural as play. The people want to go to work. They enjoy problem solving, enjoy meeting their colleagues. They enjoy achieving a sales victory, enjoy hitting a productivity target and so on. The people will not be trying to get out of work or to take shortcuts or to do bad work and so on. Now, if you believe that about your workforce, there's going to be much more participation, going to be much more trust. You will ask people here, what do you think the best way of doing something is, because you believe they'll give you the right answer. Whereas a Theory X manager would never think of doing that, because the Theory X manager would assume that his or her staff would say, we do this only because it's the way that gives them the least possible bother rather than doing most work. Again, McGregor wouldn't say that this is always right. I imagine we'd all prefer this one. And he wasn't saying that this was always wrong. They were called Theory X and Theory Y to be neutral. And McGregor said it rather depends on the people, for example. If you're dealing with staff who have, because of their background and culture, been brought up to hate work, to be brought up not really to cooperate with management and so on, who are perhaps low skilled and who only kind of go to work to do a kind of rubbish job to get food and so on. And you come at them with the kind of theory Y type liberal participative management style. First of all, they'll probably be very suspicious of you. And secondly, they might take you for a ride. And maybe the way you have to handle Theory X people is to adopt this hard attitude. Similarly, if you are involved with Theory Y type people, perhaps graduates or highly skilled people who take a pride in what they're doing, who have got a fantastic knowledge about what they're doing, and you come on them hard here as a Theory X type manager, tell them what to do, even though they might know better than you, that ain't going to go well either. So it's horses for courses, as we would say. The management style needs to match the people you're managing. Now the combination of this here, and what we're really talking about in all of this is what's called contingency management. Which means if you ask somebody, how should I manage? They will say it depends. Contingency really means it depends. And Handy came up with this best fit idea. He said that the variables you have is the leader, the natural, perhaps personality of the leader, the subordinates. Do they want to be told what to do, or do they want to be participative? Are they risk-seeking or are they risk-avoiding? There's the task. Is it a task that requires problem solving, or is it very routine? And there is the environment. Do we have the luxury of time, for example? How much money do we have in the budget? And McGregor said, but basically, if they all line up, it's going to work pretty well. So if you're a very authoritative leader who is looking after subordinates who prefer to be told what to do, because that's fairly risk-free, if the task was very kind of cut and dried, we know exactly what had to be done, so there was no need for participation and chatting about it and so on. And if the environment was one maybe where you're a bit short of time and short of budget, then that's going to work. Similarly, over here, you have a leader who is naturally participative, doesn't feel threatened by receiving ideas from staff. The subordinates are highly skilled and want to give ideas. The task is one which requires a lot of problem solving, is not routine. And the environment is one where maybe we have the luxury of time and the luxury of maybe money to experiment and so on. That's going to work. He said where you are going to get into problems is if you have a crossover somewhere. So we have a very authoritative manager put in charge of subordinates who feel themselves very skilled, who feel they want to participate, but they're given a very boring type task that there's no real problem solving involved with at all, in maybe a very tight budget and so on. That crossover isn't going to work. The subordinates are going to hate both the manager and they're going to hate the task, and it's not ideal. So when we ask how should you manage, there is no right answer. The only answer we can give is it depends. Depends on the environment, perhaps the urgency, depends on the task, is it routine or problem solving, depends on the type of subordinates you have, and then so far as you can, the manager should try to adapt. I say as far as you can because we've probably got our natural place in the kind of authoritative, participative spectrum there, but at least we can pretend to move a little bit, if only for the sake of that task. Adair, again another contingency management theorist, said that managers have to be continually switching their attention really throughout the day. that they have to show concern for individuals. What task am I giving that individual? Is it one which is sufficiently challenging? Is it one which is within their capabilities? Is it one which suits their personality? We have to think of concern for the group. The group has to feel involved. The group has to be made up of the right individuals within the group and so on. Is it large enough? Does it work well enough as a group and so on? And we also have to be mindful of the task. What task does the organization have to achieve using this group and using those individuals in the group to be successful? And we have to choose the group carefully, and we have to choose the membership of the group carefully, so that we can try to achieve this management task as best we can. Finally, just a couple of little definitions here which are mentioned in the syllabus. Entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. We probably know what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur is by and large someone who sets up a business, has a business idea, goes out and raises money, maybe from family initially, then maybe from a bank or from some sort of grant-giving organization, maybe the government, something of that sort. They take the risk, they set up a business, they've left employment, and they go it alone, so to speak. And effectively all small or large businesses have started as usually with an entrepreneur having a go and seeing if the business is going to be a success. Entrepreneurship is in many ways the lifeblood or the mainspring of an economy. Without a continual stream of new businesses, some failing, but every now and again you get a real star coming through. Think at the time of lecturing, Facebook isn't much more than 15 years old, something of that sort. That started in an entrepreneurial way. Uber started in a very entrepreneurial way, and so on. And suddenly these things, some of them take off. Anyway, it doesn't matter about the failures. As long as you get a few big hitters, then it's good for the economy. Now, what happens in intrapreneurship is a company trying to get the same dynamism, the same feeling that unless the company takes some risks, it's never actually going to make the next big breakthrough, and its life might be limited. And what the company tries to do is try to get employees to take risks. An employee who promotes innovation within their employer. So if I had been working for a computer organization and I had the idea of a kind of Facebook type application, instead of leaving my employer and starting up on my own, think how good it would have been for my employer if I'd gone to the manager and said, could you give me maybe 3 months to try this? Give me a bit of a budget and I'll get some software written and we'll see how it works. Of course, many of these ideas will come to nothing. But the entrepreneurial type organization says, unless we do this, we are not going to get enough innovation within the organization. It's going to be very dull as well. We're maybe not going to attract the best people to us as well, who maybe have an ambition, not necessarily of starting their own business, but of pursuing their own ideas. And if some of those are successful, better to do it within the organization.